I think we're good to go. Let's see this thing kick off. There she is. Welcome, everybody. We got the Antibiotic Nuke coming in, and this one's going to be a fun one. This is the single side of things. If you guys just caught on, we're at the tail end of No More Mr. Nice Guy from Robert Glover. I thought we'd slip on something a little bit lighter right now. Let's get to it. Anyways, so what's the Antibiotic Nuke? This is a funny one, and it's something interesting when you see after you've started reading the sidebar, and then you move on, and then you get past your anger phase, you start doing this stuff, and you go back and reflect and look back on this stuff. And it's interesting. Like, I can see why a lot of blue pill guys kind of get that cringe thing, because they take it fairly literally. So what I'm going to do here, if you guys don't know, by the way, what I'm talking about, it's on the sidebar of the Red Pill subreddit. It's called the Red Pill Antibiotic Nuke Common Feed. It was written by a poster who goes by the name Illimitable Man. I would provide links, but the links he has in the article don't work anymore. They don't link to his thing, and he's been switching it off, and he doesn't talk to me, so you'll just have to take my word for it. It's there. But the purpose of it, it's not quite the instruction manual, how-to guide stuff that you'll see in Glover's work, or it's not the top-level analysis, like the sociological stuff like you'd see in Rollo's work. It's not the archetype work that you'll see in Practical Female Psychology. Actually, it's more of what they refer to as... Actually, I'm sure everybody here has read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Everybody's probably seen that. And if you haven't, it's just like a bunch of aphorisms, like here's some truth, here's some wisdom, thoughts of it. And it's essentially the format has been used for a couple thousand years now. So I want to make a reference to another book that came a little bit later during the Enlightenment. It's called Reflections or Sentences and Moral Maxims by Francois Duc de la Rochefoucauld, Prince de Marcillac. And my French accent is horrible. So if you speak French, je suis désolé. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because of the translator's introduction in the Gutenberg Bible version of it. And it'll put everything in perspective here for you. So the description of the Ancien Regime in French, a despotism tempered by epigrams, like most epigrammatic sentences, contains some truth with much fiction. The society of the last half of the 17th and the whole of the 18th centuries was influenced by a precise and terse mode in which popular writers of that date expressed their thoughts. To a people naturally inclined to think that every possible view, every conceivable argument upon a question is included with a short aphorism, a shrug, and the word voila, truths expressed in condensed sentences must always have a peculiar charm. And that's how you kind of have to walk into reading the red-pilled Antibiotic Nuke. If you don't know, the guy, Illimitable Man, he uses like the Machiavelli's Prince Avi as his like social media avatar. He writes a lot about Dark Triad and Machiavellianism and stuff like that. Reading these things, it's an attempt to modernize what you would think of as those aphorism posts. That's 48 Laws of Power is another great example that uses it. But then to apply it towards sexual dynamics. But it's like the translator said, and I think he put it very well, some truth, a lot of fiction, and literary license. So we're going to kind of go through them briefly here. And so you can see for yourself why it's always told you got to try things yourself. You got to experience things for yourself. You have to apply some critical thinking to it, because if you look at this stuff just basically and literally, you're going to end up being you're going to have a spot of the tism by the end of it, and it's not going to work out well for you, and you're not going to reach the goals that you're actually trying to reach. Let me get, where did I put the, oh, there she is. Yeah, anyways, I'm glad you guys like Glover's stuff. So for example, here's the first one. Feminists claim they want equality, but what they really want is power without responsibility. They desire both male and female privilege consolidated into one, thus upsetting the gender balance. They want the privileges of being women, such as being economically provided for, giving opportunities based on beauty, and protection from physical harm by others, as well as male privilege. Authority, respect for having a career, not to be judged harshly based on appearance, which is neither pragmatic nor realistic. It ignores the biological basis for how the genders perceive each other. in the ignorance that everything is a social construct and are mostly the same, when quite evidently this is not the case. Again, this one, it should go without saying. And this is why I have a huge problem with guys who claim to be, red pilled on the internet. And honestly, like at this point, I'm kind of at the point where I'm just like, take the term, you guys can have it. I'll make something else because you're killing me here. And this is that wing of men's rights activists that pretend to be red pill, that talk about fighting feminism as their modus operandi, or they're like I'm sounding all pedantic, raison d'etre. So feminism isn't a philosophy. It's not an ideology. It's a tactic. It's essentially weaponizing. It's weaponizing the male need to protect the women in his tribe in order to get things. It's basically it. It's no different than the wife that nags her husband into getting something, applied nationwide. So it's good to know that, yeah, it's not about equality, it's about power. And you can always see that through the actions. I'm not going to waste your time here going into it too much because God knows the last thing we need is another dude with a red pill thing on his channel talking about how bad feminism is. We got it by now. Not out for us, not in our best interests. Moving on. The next one is women are irrational and inconsistent. They have a capacity for logic, but is not their modus operandi. That is to say, they must exert effort to be as logical as it is not their factory setting. A logical woman is easily baited into becoming emotional. They are easy to compromise. Their decisions are based on their current emotional state rather than abstraction or logic. It's this proclivity to change that so quickly causes them to act inconsistent and in contradiction. This one I find fascinating. So there's two ways to look at it. First way, surface level, very literal, and it makes sense. If you're thinking of yourself as a logical person, and then the other person doesn't act according to your logic, well, they're generally going to look like they're illogical. So when you look at it from the perspective of the reader being a guy who's, either sexually unsuccessful or just, red-pilled and talking about it generally, it makes perfect sense. But you dig a little deeper, and it kind of lets you know, like, there's some depth to this, and I don't know if the author intended it or not. So, for example, guys treat logic and ration as if it's some kind of, like, objective moral good. Or objective good, at least, if not moral good, which isn't quite true. If you look, and I really wish I had grabbed this beforehand, didn't know it was going to come up until just now. There's a bunch of research papers came out in Nature magazine, which is like a scientifically peer-reviewed journal that deals with biology and some of the other sciences, that talk about how we aren't designed for objective truth. Like the human brain is not wired for it because it just doesn't factor in. Like if you picture us as cavemen, do you think cavemen really cared about astrophysics from like a survival instinct? No, not really. They didn't need like a macro view of the world. They didn't need a micro view of the world. They needed like a meso or like a middle view. So the question is then, if we didn't require objective truth as a survival instinct, why do we have it? Well, here's the funny part that'll blow your mind. It's the prevailing theory right now is it's there as a manipulation tactic. It's there because once you build an emotional idea or an emotional decision you're making, rationale and logic exists to convince other people to go along with it. So it's the male version of manipulation, the same way women would do very emotional ones, appeals to authority, ego, shame, anger, those sort of things. So when you look at it through an Evo Psych perspective, you kind of understand, okay, so what does this mean then? Well, it means that girls don't have the same goals as you. Men and women are different. Men and women have the same goals. It also ties into the Evo Psych theory that sexual strategies are largely combative. Like they're not cooperative. And I mean, that's biological. That's the reason why girls' estrus cycle is hidden. Most animals, when they're going into heat, other animals can tell. Humans completely, not able to do that. And that kind of shows you right there on an instinctual level that it's not meant to be two actors talking honestly to each other. It's meant to be, dishonest, which is no different than a guy saying, I love you, and then scramming after he knocks her up to go have another girl. Meanwhile, single mom's sitting there. Where have all the good men gone? You know what I'm saying? So the irrationality and inconsistency, while it's presented here as like an objective fact of the universe, what it really means is that they have a different set of values, they have a different set of goals, and they aren't going to align with yours. Our logic is only as good as the underlying assumptions we have. So in this case, this also shows that the guy who's talking about women being irrational and inconsistent isn't aware of other people's wants and needs. And this is a factor in what creates narcissism as a personality trait or disorder, depending on how extreme you get. When you can't see other people as human beings that have their own wants and desires, but instead of as archetypes or set pieces for your own story, that starts to delve into the unhealthy versions of narcissism. So it's something that you should take, and I know it's just a paragraph here talking about how women are run by feelings, but in the end, if you really look into it, what it means is you have to understand their goals are not your goals, and instead of using your own logistical underpinnings to describe their behaviors, you have to observe. Observe what they want, and then through their actions, you can know what their desires are. And then again, words are... But that gets to the next point. Women are Machiavellian in nature. This means they're proficient at being manipulative versus the typical guy. The evolutionary theoretical basis for this is because of smaller size, inferior musculature, women had to learn to use men as tools rather than directly oppose them in physical combat. This makes strength a property to be mentally rather than physically violent. Physical violence is outlawed, whereas mental abuse is not. This allows women to get their way without being held accountable by a system of law. The law does not legislate in personal morality to this extent. Where a man's instinct is to hit, a woman's is to take a big dump on your mind. Again, this one, it goes without saying. You look at it, it makes sense. I mean, again, go to any MGTOW, Black Pill, or MRA channel, and you're going to see all these guys talking about how the court system is biased towards men. And it is insofar as you're using your instincts. If you're just thinking, well, as a man, this thing is good and this thing is right and things should be, it's going to seem like a very irrational thing that's against you. But we'll use divorce law, for example. Depends on the jurisdiction, but for a lot of places, what they've done is because it wastes so much court time arguing about child support payments, what they just do is they take a calculation. How much you've earned, how much they earned, add X, Y, and Z variables, multiply by 7, whatever, you end up with a number. Now, if you just go by a standard life script, guy works, girl stays at home, she's a stay-at-home mom, you're signaling to the courts that, yes, I've decided to take these people on as dependents, in this case, the wife and the kids. The kids, most people are good with. The guys, in their head, they think, well, I'm taking her on as a dependent with the assumption that she's going to be a good wife to me. Again, covert contract. If you've read Glover's stuff, you see it. The problem comes when it comes to the dissolution of the marriage. Well, the court doesn't really care about your covert contract. They saw you just saying, yeah, I'll take care of her, and I'll let her sacrifice her future earnings to take care of me and take care of the kids and wash dishes or whatever. So they see that as an obligation for you to support her because you've created a grievance on her or created a... I can't remember the term for it, but a hardship. You've created a hardship on her end, which you owe. The answer to this one isn't that the law is biased against men. It's that the law is biased against life scripts that you're being given to be as a man. So yeah, having a girl that works, earning as much money as you, if not more, that's a legal way out of it. Deciding not to take those extra 80, 90 hours a week of overtime and instead using that to spend more quality time with the kids so it looks better in a divorce. That's the thing. So yeah, while women are manipulative like that, at the same time, guys are only manipulated insofar as they want to be. All this stuff happens because you want it to happen. The next one, it's a bit of a spicy take though. So race does not matter if you are rich. A lot of you are small-minded and stuck on the superficial, white, black, Arab, Indian, Asian, whatever. You have a certain perception of the world based on your culture. Perhaps where you live, the white man is God, but I know all racial barriers are overcome by power and money is power. If you're a 5-foot Asian with a 2-inch thing that girls laugh at, a 7-digit bank balance is sure to offset that. Focus less on your race and more on your success. Your insecurities will get you nowhere. The real segregation is between rich and poor, and even that is more true when it comes down to women. Never forget that. Rich versus poor is the only thing that matters. And he goes into more of it. Again, this one, it's a very crude and simplistic way of viewing it, but there is some truth to this. A lot of fiction, though. There is a how best to put this. There is a certain unspoken thing that happens in the sphere. And there's a lot of guys who come from South Asian cultures. In the same way we would think of like the average beta male, when you think of beta as in bad, the guy who can't get anything, the guy who's like an involuntary celibate. The Southeast Asia adds a racial demographic to it, and this is where you get guys that come in with like some of the worst nice guy behaviors you've ever seen. And because in the certain current climate we have, everything seems to be like being put through a racial filter, they automatically assign that their racial differences as the things. Like, oh, if I was a white manlet that had no confidence, I'd be getting all the poons. Like, no, it's not how it works, man. So he's right in that you got to focus on what matters. He's wrong, though, in that he talks about wealth. So wealth is tangential to the issue. It's not the issue. Girls may like guys with money, and if that were true, Bill Gates would be just drowning in it, which he isn't. What it is status. Women are social creatures. And so once you're seen as high status, which usually wealth is, like earning wealth is the thing that creates high status for you. So they're like a parallel accomplishment. You get things that have status in your various social circles, and it tends to do better. You can be, like you said, his example here, the 5-foot Asian, a 7-digit bank balance doesn't mean anything in itself. But I mean, who's the guy who runs Alibaba Enterprises? Small Asian man. He's just like sexiest man alive, apparently. But it's status, not wealth. So why does that matter? Well, I'm going to go a little Jordan Peterson on you here. You picture the Pareto principle. That's 20% of the, or in sexual dynamics or Briffault's law, that 20% of the men are getting access to 80% of the casual sex. That's something that everybody can mostly agree on. But what people seem to miss on this is they think of it as a single sexual market. And we are way too big to have a single sexual market. Maybe your small village of 100 people has a single sexual market. But what we have is a bunch of overlapping markets or social hierarchies or matrices of markets. So what this means is for status, and it's never been easier to get status because and think back to your life. What social hierarchies do you exist in now? Well, there's your workplace. And out of your workplace, there's your department. Maybe then you're on a baseball team and you play with those guys. That's a different one there. You go to the bar. It's a temporary, artificially created social hierarchy. You're in a band. When you guys go out and tour, there's another social hierarchy. Everything has its own hierarchy around it. Your Twitch channel, your YouTube channel, everything. So in order to get status, you have to excel in as many of these as possible in the ones that tend to have female attendance, so co-ed spaces for the most part. Now, sometimes you can make your own. Like esports has created their own gamer girls. So once you have a successful thing that becomes popular enough, they will come. But for the most part, focusing on anything but your perceived status. And this is, again, it's overarching. Your self-improvement stuff you're talking about, your entrepreneurial stuff, your game, all this stuff serves in the singular purpose of building status within whatever hierarchy. And doing that all together will definitely get past any stupid barriers like race that people talk about. Now here, one thing too. So Scott had a good thing here. So be a better version of yourself and watch them come. I don't want you to give the impression that it's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. You still have to have the burden of performance. Like I said, girls don't like rejection. They are terrified of rejection, and so they won't approach. So even when you have, the whole point of building this status is it allows you to use game, to approach people, to be more charming, to be more charismatic, to look at your own self-interest, to be sexual in the ways that you want to be, and it actually resonates better. So I would almost want to call it a force multiplier, because without game, all your status isn't going to matter. But with game, that status is what allows it, that's what gives it fuel and that lets it run. So there's the nuance that a lot of guys seem to miss, but it's good to know anyway. Next one is women are hypergamous and that they feel entitled to a superior mate. You have to be richer or at least equally, more educated or at least equally, be better looking or at least equal. You need to be more popular than she is or at least equally popular. You can offset one area. And then he talks about LMS, which, won't even going to get into that. Looks, money, status, whatever. And another, but you're lower in at least two areas, just forget it. Again, A little bit of truth, a lot of fiction. Women are social creatures. We've already been talking about that. That's kind of the theme in this one. They also have their own status markers based on, their herd. If you look at an Amish community or a Mormon community or a bunch of girls that hang out in New York City and party hard in their 20s, they're all going to have different social norms that they look to for sexual attraction. Now, there's some universal ones, tall, physically fit, enough aesthetics that it shows like healthy genes. There's that subconscious stuff. Some of it is largely unchangeable with the exception of like you can work out and be more fit, you can dress better. But again, actually even dressing better. So like dressing better in these social markers, this is the part that you can influence. And this is why it's good that we're closer to bonobos than gorillas in like the primate hierarchy. So they feel entitled to a superior mate, and that's fine. The thing is, superior has a very loaded meaning. It's a bit of a container word because what's superior in one group is not superior in another. Also why, once girls hit that epiphany phase and they want to settle down and they want to get a nice kind man, that's where those silly articles about guys with dad bods come in handy. Because to them, what they see as superior is superior ability to like settle down. And guys who are limiting their sexual options through the lack of sexual attractiveness, it signals that. And so that's why it comes across as a very sincere sign of attraction that girls have. But it's only to meet that certain need. At the same time, if you're at the workplace, girls don't want a deadbeat. They want a guy who earns as much as them or not more. Or social status. Maybe even a girl's willing to be like the sugar baby for a starving artist. But that guy, when she brings him to dinner parties, shows off, oh, that hot artist, she's dating Cindy from accounting. All the girls swoon, social status. But you get the point. Superior isn't just a looks money game thing. I don't know who started this meme. I think it's a ridiculous meme. And the reason why it's so popular is because people who have none of the three seem to think that that's what they're missing. It's no different than the guy we were just talking about from Southeast Asia that blames his race on his lack of options. So just remember, and this is the thing, an important part of game is setting yourself up to signal availability to the type of women that are into what you have. So if you want rocker girls, well then you join a rock band. You dress like a rocker, you act like a rocker. Rocker is who you are, essentially. If you want like a good trad women, well then yeah, you go to church and do that kind of stuff. If you want goth girls, then yeah, you better be listening to goth music, dressing like a goth. Like, you get the point. It's all about, it's the marketing. And you got to signal. It's, again, peacocks show off their feathers to prospective mates. If you want to pick up a girl in the Mormon community, the best way to do that is not dressed in leather tights. Just saying. This one here, I really wanted to correct this because this has been a meme for way too long. So buying into the last point, this is why 20% of the guys are having sex with 80% of the chicks. Women date up, men date down, and yes, this has created rising social inequality since women entered the professions. Yes, again, some truth, a lot of fiction. It's not that 20% of guys have their soft harems, 8 girls per guy, and then the rest of you guys have to sit there. There's X amount of friends with benefits going on. X amount of it happening. 80% of it is among, the top 20% of guys. Those are the guys having all of it. It's not necessarily meaning it's with all the 80% of the girls. It just means with the girls that are going out and getting some, 80% of it's going to those. And that's been reflected on a lot of dating sites with their analytic data. And so knowing that just shows you that, okay, so what do the 20% of the guys have? Well, for a large part, the 20% of guys show up. A huge part of it. And I don't think people understand how, like, a lot of guys, once they've been red pilled, they get through their thing, they say it's not as hard as you think it is. And it's not because, you need to be 6 foot, 6 figures. Those things are all difficult. They take time, yes. But showing up is a huge signal boost. Because most guys just don't. Most guys are risk averse. Most guys think that you have to be girlfriend and boyfriend for a year before you even try going for this stuff. So yeah, showing up is huge. And that's where I come with my little pithy aphorism with the voila at the end of it, where I say, the top 20% of guys has never been easier to get into because people are just getting out of your way. What are guys doing right now? Guys are playing video games at home. Guys are watching Xbox. Everybody does that. But the guys that hit that threshold where they aren't quite attractive enough to have it easily fall into their lap, or they didn't build the skills. It's their coping strategy. They've sunk back into it. So just by being separate from them, you've already, like I would say, just random number off the top of my head, half your competition is gone. So now instead of having to compete with, 80% of guys to get to that 81st percentile, you're competing with like 30%. But you see what I mean here? And he talks about the rising social inequality since women enter the professions. There's something interesting about this, but I don't want to pontificate about it too much. It had to do with Sparta, if you can remember that. So if you guys don't know, Sparta's system, political system, was pretty interesting. In this case, men had political office. No women could vote. But women had inheritance rights. So if the male died, wife would get the inheritance. And you repeat this over however many generations you had. It ended up, women had an economic block. They became like the Federal Reserve of Sparta. And they ended up having a lot of power that they influenced over it. So yeah, this rising social inequality since women enter the professions, I don't know if it's equal to what Sparta was having, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has a lot of parallels to it. Now, to what extent and how long it would take until that hit a tipping point, I don't know. To be honest, I'm too busy living life, and you should be too. So, this is good to know for the navel gazing. I wouldn't devote much brain power to it because it doesn't solve any of your problems right now. Maybe your great grandkids need to worry about it. I see the super chat, by the way. I will get to that. I want to finish the points here first, and we'll spend some time after. So if a woman thinks she's better than you, she can't respect you. If she can't respect you, she can't love you. Women love differently to the way men love women. Women's love is based on adoration. Adoration is a concentrated amount of respect. Respect is derived from power. Be powerful if you want to be loved, or you will never be loved. You will be held in contempt for being weak. Again, some truth to this, a lot of fiction. It's true that women's love is based on adoration. That goes without saying. Hypergamy, it's a function of hypergamy, which is a function, not a bug, of female sexuality and relationships in general. Women don't want variety. They just want the best they can get. Guys want variety. That's why we'll settle for anything. So it sounds bad because you think of, there's a single sexual marketplace. So that means Chad is taking all the women and I have no chance. So why should I try? Let's just play video games all day. Here's my Modern Warfare decals. Again, there's not a single sexual marketplace. There's multiple ones. So you can be Chad in any number of them. Maybe not all of them, but enough where you can get your own level of success. They are right in that. So once she finds her best option, she's extremely loyal to that best option, as long as you're the best option. In the same way that guys have a concept called wife goggles, where once we're dating our girl, once we've started to love her, whatever that means to you, you put on a set of goggles and it kind of locks her in that place and time. So if you started dating her as the hot, 16-year-old when you were in high school, she could be 54 right now, and you look at her and you still see that hot 16-year-old when you first started dating as teenagers. That's wife goggles. Girls have that too, but it's the hypergamous filter. Once they've chosen you, they like everything you like, everything you do is wonderful, and all the rough edges are sanded away. It's like an Instagram filter for the soul. Good thing from this is because that means once she's yours, or once it's your turn, then she's your turn. She doesn't actually look at other guys. She doesn't see other guys. She doesn't think about it. They don't think like guys think. To them, it's just now they're just guys. They're no longer sexual objects. Everybody's put into the beta male category, the friend zone. Having said that, over time, if you start losing the things that she aspired or that she adored about you, like if she dated the hottest model in the thing, you start getting fat. Maybe you were hot, high-priced lawyer and you lost your job, and now she's you lost that status. All these little things that can happen can slowly whittle away at that hypergamous buffer that you got. You can screw up occasionally, but she knows you'll get back on your feet. That's fine. Eventually, there's a time when that adoration turns into contempt. And this is where we see all the sad woe is me stories about guys getting cheated on. It's when they aren't able to see the signs. And then when the signs are there, they delude themselves into thinking if they just try harder, they can get them back. It's not how it works. Hypergamy is like a light switch. It's either on or it's off. So once you start seeing signs, like Girls Night Out, Rollo Tomasi article, great one. You should read it after this. Once girls start doing that and putting themselves out there into the sexual marketplace again, well, then you've already got your indication that you may no longer be the hypergamous best option, and it's good to start looking in your own options. It was actually a great Royce article from Chateau Artiste. It's called I think it was How to Alpha Widow. Artiste. How to break up. I think it was maybe How to Break Up with Your Girlfriend. Was it the manly way to break up with a woman? All right, whatever. Anyways, the point was he brought it up, and it was actually a pretty good roadmap. I'm going to have it in my syllabus in the Patreon group. If you guys check that out, you'll get in there. We'll get you in the locker room. You can see more about it. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of describing it. It's that once you start to see, or even just before a girl starts to lose attraction for you, starts putting herself out there, dressing a little sexier for other people, you know all the signs, then dump her right away. And the idea is that's supposed to cut off that whole losing respect for you slowly over time, or the betaization over time. And then there's a chance you can put her on a plate rotation. It was pretty clever, but at the same time, it's right. Like, the one who needs the other one least has the most power within the relationships. The cardinal rule of relationships. And so, contrary to popular belief, once you start seeing that love and feeling is gone in your relationship, the answer is not to try harder or do better. The answer is to detach. And it sounds counterintuitive, but it works for two reasons. One, if there's no hope of it coming back, well, at least you're not going to be blindsided when something hits the fan. And if there is a chance it can come back, you being less interested puts it on her. Same way as you would think of pre-selection. If you're hitting on a girl at the bar, here, hold my drink for me. Like putting the onus on her to what's the word I'm looking for here? Present herself to you. Anyways, whatever. I'm kind of quibbling over something that doesn't really matter at this point. So it's neat to understand. So respect is derived from power, and that is true, but power is, again, one of those weird container words. People fill it with all kinds of stupidity, and they expect you to believe it. In this case, when you hear respect is derived from power, from a sexual standpoint, what that means is the power to walk away. In the modern society, male ways of expressing power are largely outlawed. You're not allowed to assault people. You're not allowed to threaten people. All you're allowed to do right now is leave. And if you are a prize, leaving is a strong enough incentive to keep people acting right. Again, that's another one of the big reasons we tell guys that getting married is not a good idea. Because that's basically hobbling you. If a woman thinks... Okay, I got that one. All right, we'll do the super chat now. Anyways... our future mind one. Thank you. $20 US super chat. Hey Ryan, I loved the no more Mr. Nice Guy thoughts on being the new guy in the group. Start residency next week. Oh man, good luck. You picked the perfect time to start your residency. I'm not going to lie to you. Now all these protests have been a couple weeks behind. The rumor is, the plague is coming through the sphere, so you'll learn a lot. But yeah, and honestly, I'm glad. If you guys don't know, we're going to talk about it a lot, because out of all the things you could take from lessons in everything we do here, if you can internalize the stuff from No More Mr. Nice Guy and maybe one book on game, you're pretty much ahead of 99% of the competition. And that's generally all you need. The rest is good to have, but not required. But back to this then. So women rely on men to be emotionally stoic. We often call this holding frame. We don't actually call it holding frame. We call it being the oak. I'll get into that in a second. You have to be mentally strong so she can lean on you. She finds it attractive. You cannot lean on her. There's a double standard. If you lean on her, the relationship will eventually fall apart. She can't handle your problems, no longer find you attractive. You're a man. You have to be better than her, which means you have to be stronger. This is why women get emotional. We have to be unreactive. We are strong, and emotions can indulge their emotions, enjoy the ride. Anyways, same thing over and over. But here's the point. Why does he call it holding frame? Because it's not holding frame. Because you can hold frame and get angry. You can hold frame and be emotionally vulnerable. Frame is just your narrative script. And that's the only one that matters to you. It's like a healthy version of narcissism is a good way to think of it. This is actually called being the oak. We always joke there's two types of men. There's the rock and there's the oak. The rock is the guy that just sits there. Emotions bounce off of him. Nothing happens. It's not very good from a relationship standpoint, but it's good in that he tends not to be bothered by anything. But we're talking about this from a relationship, or at least a sexual standpoint. So why do you want to be the oak instead? Well, the oak, like I said, it's like an oak tree in a massive wind. If you think of the wind as emotions, it buffers, the trees move, everything moves. It can kind of take it all, but it's not unreactive to it. So girls are emotional. They just are. Anybody who's ever lived with a girl for any length of time will tell you at least one story at some point where she started crying and didn't know why. It's just the way it is. I can't blame them. Their hormones go out of whack like every 30 days. If they get pregnant, they go completely out of whack for an entire year. Like, what did you expect? Them to be Vulcans? Like, no. But the problem is, and this is going to get into like the LGBTQ thing. The problem is, if you're in that emotional state, it's hard to get out of it. If you don't believe me, when somebody's freaking out at you, tell them to calm down and see how well that works. This is how something, and it's going to be a tangent, so bear with me. If you've ever heard of it, it's called like LBD, lesbian bed death. And that is in a relationship you get, and it's very common in the thing. If anybody who's had any friends who swing that way, they'll probably mention it at some point, maybe not with the same terminology, but you get two people that are more passive receptors as opposed to like sexually aggressive, the way a man would be in a relationship. And then slowly it ends up tapering off until a dead bedroom. And so that was just like a common thing that happened. If you get two girls, they tend to act like girls act, and it causes that. Same thing when you see like Karen arguing on TikTok with another Karen. If you'll ever notice, it always turns into like yapping chihuahuas. And that's because they all feed off of each other's emotions. Emotional states are very, very impressionable, especially in women, but also in men. So if you get somebody being angry and then somebody else getting angry back and bing, 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 you end up with two people that are just escalating it completely. So part of being the oak, and this is one of the, like, every time I ask, like, what is it that women bring to a relationship other than sex? Some girl always has to bring back, well, what do you guys bring to it? You want to know what a guy brings to it? He brings the oak. When she's going off and when she's gotten this feedback loop going, just you being able to buffer that, and that's simple tools, fogging, agree and amplify, amuse mastery, to be able to bring that down from a 10 out of 10 complete freakout to a 5 out of 10, hey, let's go watch a movie. It's a superpower. And a lot of girls are amazed that their man has it, and it's seen as a super attractive display of higher value. It's also a beta characteristic, so just to be aware of that. This is not the kind of thing you do with one-night stands. It's not the kind of thing you do with friends with benefits. These are comfort-building exercises, and these are more for long-term relationships, and a girl has to earn it. If she doesn't earn it, you're just the emotional tampon, and that's not what you want. You don't want to be the guy that the girl complains about those last guys she was dating to you, and you hoping like, well, she'll eventually see me as a nice guy. It's like, no. Once you're that guy that she complains about in the relationships, then she can have some oak. You just have to treat yourself as valuable. Which kind of goes into the next point. Always set boundaries with everyone. Do not be a pushover. This is probably the most important bullet point here. Again, no argument with that. God knows if you haven't caught that by now watching my channel, I don't know what to tell you. I won't bother expanding on it here. Buying into the last point, when women have little sympathy for weak men despite the fairer sex that you may be accustomed to hearing, a man is far more likely to assist a weak man financially or emotionally than a woman is. And that's true. I actually was on a dude party with John, and he had, what's that guy? Myron Gaines. And we were having a little discussion about how, what do you call them? The second wave MGTOWs or those kind of guys. And they were complaining about this, that, and the other thing. He's like, dude, men are suffering. And I'm like, yeah, screw it. And he's like, yeah, but we can get them to, like, no, you can't. They don't want to be saved. But here's the point of this. Most guys in this space, in the sphere, in any capacity, they kind of want to save their fellow men. They have that covert contract, but if they just give the right information to guys, that guys will stop being such pushovers. And maybe we can fix everything. So our need to simp for women isn't to need to simp for women. It's the need to simp and fix things. A lot of guys will end up simping for their fellow man, the kind of failures of men who want nothing worse than just to take you with them. So in this one, again, a lot of truth to it, some fiction. But just be aware that that need and that assistance of weaker men financially or emotionally and being more likely to do it is not necessarily a good thing. It's, if anything, it's letting you know about male weakness or the ability for men to be manipulated. And concern over people who don't show concern over their own lives is a very easy way it happens. If you don't believe me, just check out anybody in the MRA and see how many successes they've had in the last 50 years. Women are more selfish. Oh, we already said that. Yeah. Man's love expected to be sacrificial. Women's isn't. Yeah, 100%. When you talk about men and women to love, a woman's love, well, the way to describe it is always about things that she likes. And when guys talk about it, it's what they sacrifice. You just have to be aware that when men and women are talking about a lot of this stuff, these container words, that they're not talking the same language. And so, I mean, generally I would just say, why are you arguing about this with a chick anyway? It's not going to solve anything. But if you're in a place where you're forced to, maybe you're a professional debater and you're up there with Susie Homemaker arguing about the concept of love, just realize the term doesn't mean the same thing to the same people, and you really do need to be more specific. And you'll find a lot of these arguments really fall to the wayside once you realize that it's just two people talking past each other. Women have a pronounced gender group bias, which means they typically side with other women in a conflict regardless of logic or argument. Women are like herd, and to stick closely together, they form cartels and use the power of the group to henpeck or destroy enemies. That's essentially feminism. But yeah, it's true. During a divorce, a lot of guys will find that their social circles will side with the girl, even if she's done something horrible. Sometimes even a guy's parents have done it, which is absolutely brutal. I can't think of a worse betrayal of their child than to take the side of like some chick who cheated on him. And that's, again, it's a feature, not a bug of humanity. Societies that did this, that took the girl's side no matter what, they tended to have more cave babies, and more cave babies made more cave babies. Guys were just fodder for the fire. Sperm is cheap, eggs are expensive, and just be aware it exists. Luckily for us, we're in a society that's got enough abundance and a large enough population that you can kind of ignore that instinct. In the same way that we instinctively want to eat simple carbs for energy, but we have to avoid it now, otherwise we're going to get diabetes and die a big fat man. The next one, he talks about sexual plurality. If I have to really describe like alpha fuck beta bucks right now, like I don't know what to tell you. We're past that. Anyways. Women don't care about men. He kind of goes off the same point here. The law prioritizes females' safety and well-being over logic, honor, and justice. Yes, I 100% agree. Again, it's just what we talked about before. We got to protect the women as a society, and that's their old order of thinking. That works in a scarcity society. That's where, people starve, there's famines, things are very dangerous. Yes, being overly protective of the more important gender of the baby makers makes more sense, but we're kind of past that now, and we're in this weird age where we haven't quite figured out how to redesign these incentives, and we haven't had like the genetic distance to be able to even lose it as an instinct. But that's just aware, and this is why I would say that anybody who's doing the MRA thing and talking about legal rights and legal responsibilities and blah blah blah, they're missing the point. Like, this is human nature. It's not going to change, and you crying that the law is unfair is just going to have people ignore you because you're going against an instinctive moral imperative, and you're not going to change people's minds because you can talk about it logically. It just doesn't work that way. Western females, typically Anglosphere and Northern Europe, are self-entitled and come from a physiological position of thinking they're better than you are. They believe that this, despite numerous insecurities, because they've been raised to view men as instruments by their desires. They have been told they must be impressed, that a man must whine her and dine her, and obviously the onus is on him to win her heart. Again, this one here, stop taking women so seriously. This strong, independent woman thing, I'll tell you right now, if women, writ large, thought of themselves as strong, independent women that didn't need no man, why do they have to repeat it every 5 minutes? Does that sound like something that somebody thinks is true? Or does that sound like the guy who keeps trying to tell everybody how alpha he is? Meanwhile, you look at him, you're like, you can't even lift your own body weight in the shower. What are you talking about? Guys who don't understand subtext and nuance and don't understand process communication, they automatically see all these aphorisms of female supremacy, and they see it as like true, but you don't take it literally. The kind of people that brag about how great they are all the time are probably the most insecure, and they know it. That's why they're using these self-talk pep talks to get them going. And it's a horrible self-sabotaging attitude when you hear somebody telling you how great they are and just assume they're telling the truth. Now we can argue that, well, TV told them they're great, so they believe it. And I'll buy that when video games cause school shootings. Like, we've already gotten past this. We understand that nobody telling you what to think is going to tell you what to think. Your responses from acting and the responses that come back are what matter. So in this case, girls act like they're better than men because men supplicate to them way too much. That's all it is. It's not because Disney said it. Disney is just reflecting that back at them to attack those insecurities in order to sell widgets. But you can't take it seriously. Again, a little bit of truth, a lot of fiction. Women need men more than men need women. This one, I love this. This is my moon is made out of cheese argument. So is this true? Do women need men more than men need women? We don't know. We can postulate, and intuitively we can say it kind of makes sense, but it's hard to say, and there's no objective way of finding that out. But, like I said, if you tell somebody the moon is made out of cheese and they go to the gym 3 days a week, well then I don't care. From a red-pilled lens, the moon is made out of cheese. So in this, it's good to internalize that women need men more than men need women. Whether or not it's true, doesn't even matter. But you can't say that. You got to believe. I thought this was all about the truth. It's like it's never been about the truth. Nothing red pill has been about the truth. It's been about observing things and basing your decisions on the best outcomes for you. It's pure will to power. And power in this case meaning freedom. So yeah, assume she needs you more than you need her. And with that mental model in place, you're actually able to better make decisions that will make you more attractive in the long term, open up better options in your future, whether it comes to just love or dating or relationships. And I don't care if it's true. I'm not going to argue whether it's true or not. But if you're not believing it, it's like Christopher Hitchens said with free will. Does free will exist? He goes, well, I know this. Even if it doesn't, I'm going to continue acting as if it is, because what else am I going to do? You have to do something. And it's exactly that. His next part is about the wall. Women are depreciating assets. Their major asset, unique selling point is sexual beauty and fertility, which is true for the most part. Like I said, from a romantic lens. That's the problem, is that most, girls and simps will read this and like, yeah, but whatever, this girl, she runs Facebook and blah, blah, blah. Like, dude, nobody cares. Ian Ironwood had a great post, The Praxeology of the Dominant Male, where he talks about guys are increasingly put in a position where the economic dominance of their household is not how the relationship dynamics play out. So in other words, you earning more money is no longer how you become the dominant man in the household. Why do you want that? Well, that's because time tested and true, the most stable relationships we've seen have been male led and male dominated. So that's good to know. Taking the Lindy effect there. So in this case, yeah. So if they're earning more, well then what do you do? Most guys are like, well, you just got to earn more. I think Bruno had a post. I actually have a Red Pilled Coffee episode, and I strongly suggest you watch it, where it's about what do you do when a girl earns more money? You got to hide money. You got to be all like, deceptive about it. Get some side hustles going like it's a battle. It's like, no, just flip the table. Economic input is no longer how you establish dominance. And this is why this matters here when you talk about depreciating assets. Girl's top tier performer at Facebook. She runs the company, whatever. As soon as she walks through that door, the only quality that matters is her femininity, her value to you, like what's in it for me. And the job stuff doesn't matter. So as soon as you stop taking that seriously, it no longer becomes a piece on the chessboard. You know what I mean? Then they mentioned riding through life uneasy, no real talent. Like I said, there's an argument for this that could be made. It's somewhat true. For a lot of part, I agree with it. I've seen a lot of girls that I've worked with back when I was still working in the finance district who have basically said, yeah, just because I got these, like, doors are opening for me. Like, good for them. I don't really care. Once you walk through this door, the only thing I care about is being pleasant, sweet, and available. And that is a great way to show aloofness. It's hard for a lot of guys, though, because they actually treat their worth as in what they can earn for other people. It's a very sacrificial way of showing love. So you kind of have to go against your hard wiring in here, because in the age of abundance, the models of scarcity just don't work. Again, men are not born, they are created. Same thing. I mean, there is no inherent worth in a guy other than the value he provides to people around him. It's the benevolent dictator theory of relationships, and it's pretty much a solid one. Girls have intrinsic worth because they got the baby makers. We've already talked about that part. Guys don't have intrinsic worth. That's why self-esteem for a guy is a nonsensical concept. You should obviously have confidence, but esteem for men comes through accomplishment. Once you do things, well, you passed university, you moved out of your parents' place, smaller ones, then up to bigger ones. Oh, you got your first job. Oh, you bought your first house, or any one of these lifestyle markers that you can attach it to. Oh, your band just plays its first gig. Like, all these things men do. And that's what creates their status, and that's what creates their esteem. So it's self-created esteem, but it's not self-esteem. And the next one here, men take more risks than women are expected to do so. Being fearful, unconfident, and risk-averse as a man leads to failure. You must be confrontational and risk-taking. Absolutely. We talked about the oak being a super attractive display of higher value from a beta standpoint. You being the risk-taking one, again, huge display of higher value. It's like a superpower. It's like the equivalent of watching a girl breastfeed. A guy looks at that, he's like, I'm amazed. I could never do that. Well, that's what risk-taking is. Well, it's a little less messy, but you know what I mean? It's got the same parallels. I'm really going to regret using that metaphor. Next part was the single mothers. So they breed boys, not men, without outside intervention. Boys do little except for eat pizza and eat Xbox with no direction. This one here, yeah, we've all seen the stats. Kids that are most likely to have poor lifestyle outcomes usually come from broken families. Now, whether that's because the kids that were most likely to be broken come from the type of parents that are less likely to stay together, or whether the parents breaking up is what caused it, I'm not here to quibble on that, but just realize that it's really difficult, if not impossible, for a woman to raise a man to be a good man. If you want to read more on this, Promise Keepers is a good one from Rollo Tomasi, where a lot of guys will be raised by their divorced mom, and she will give them, like, basically complain about her ex, how bad he was as a man. Most girls' complaints about men being trash, by the way, is usually specifically pointed at the men in their lives that left them, or that they left. So a guy wakes up one day, decides that I'm never going to be that guy. We talked about it during Glover. Rollo talked about it during his. And they decide to throw out the baby with the bathwater. They take their mom's complaints as serious. They take them as literal. And they literally stop doing the things that allowed their dad, in this case, to attract their mom. So it's not good. The red pill is about pragmatism and truth based on observation. It's not idealistic. In some ways, you can say it is liberal, but not in the idealistic pseudoscience that your institutions have taught you to perceive it as. And he's talking about, like, liberalism is the same way as the Enlightenment. So if you guys don't know, I had an episode with John. I called it Lloyd's Coffee House, a chat with John. And one guy asked, like, why is this called Lloyd's? That's the funny thing I found with Red Pill, where it's observation-based. Again, a post by Keone Galt, Hawaiian libertarian, talked about... He essentially got the term red pill started. He was the first guy that I'm aware of who used it in a game sense. And then he realized, it's sad, just to distill it down, stop listening to what people say, because what they say is largely manipulative and ego-driven. Watch what they do and base your actions on the outcomes and the observations. And so in that case, it's kind of on the similar thread as like the Scottish Enlightenment, which started in places like Lloyd's Coffee House. So when he talks about liberalism, that's what he means there. And it's very interesting. But this is important to know too, by the way. I know this sounds academic, like how does this help me get laid, whatever. Once you understand that, you're going to start looking at these like pithy categorical imperatives that people tell you should do on social media, like on Twitter from your favorite gurus, and you're going to see them in a whole different light. When guys are like, well, men should do this and men must do this, or you're not a real man if you don't do this. Every time you hear that, realize it's somebody on the other end trying to manipulate you to do something for their best interests and not yours. And this is what separates Red Pill from just about any other, I guess, lack of a better word, any other system of self-improvement for men out there. It's that it's taking your own interests at heart, as opposed to somebody else's ideological expectations. So every time you hear somebody say they're Red Pill and they say you must or should or will do something or you're not a man, realize that they're not red pilled. They're just pulling the blinders over you. Something to know. We're down to, we're running a little less, so we'll hurry these ones up. So last ones, social market value is everything. Sometimes a low value man says things which are creepy, which is said by a high value man, which is flirty or sexy. 100%. The lens of status influences all. And you see MGTOW guys and MRAs, they like doing this as like a cathartic revenge fantasy. They actually start catfishing women online by using supermodel posters or pictures of them. I'm sure you've seen that one floating around where the guy pretends to be a supermodel and then starts talking about stupid stuff like illegal things, like Chris Hansen level, like, and then the girls still think it's cute. Oh, it's adorable. And I'm like, you got the right idea, but the conclusions you're drawing from are completely ridiculous. They have that to mean that you can be a complete antisocial spurg, but as long as you're hot, it's okay, which is most likely why looks maxing is so prevalent. Because guys are, like, they're ugly in the soul. And they think, well, all I need is a better jawline, and the girls will love me even without all those flaws. It's an element of hiding the badness. Again, go back to Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and you'll see what I'm talking about there if you don't know. In reality, girls see this example and they think, oh, he's just joking around. Like, nobody's going to talk about doing illegal stuff like that online. He's clearly joking and shows he's very irreverent and somewhat attractive with an attractive guy. So yeah, status means everything. But if you don't have status, it's hard to differentiate what status means because, like I said, if you're an unattractive guy in your soul and you see an attractive guy saying some stuff you could never get away with, you may be missing the subtext on that. He may be saying it completely irreverent just to get a rise out of people. He doesn't mean it. He doesn't care. And if the other person gets mad, he got his goal. And that's the idea. It's like just showing he's not afraid to be a little edgy, as opposed to walking up and actually being an edgelord, which turns people off because, yeah, you must believe it. Part of that's the halo effect, but a lot of that is really just ugliness deep in your soul, man. Your value is everything, and you should always be improving yourself. Again, this should go without saying. What else are you going to do? Jerk off in your living room? Like, during life, there's going to be periods where you plateau. There's going to be periods where you're burnt out and you need some rest and recuperating time. There's always going to be periods of like a small decline or some plateau. Take time off, relax. That's great. But in general, what else do you have to do in life but increase the things that are important to you? Even if it's small. So this advice, it codes too simplistic for man. It kind of codes for human being. Something to think about. Your diet and exercise can place a certain handicap on the ability to utilize your potential. The obese and those who eat poorly, but aren't necessarily fat or low energy, waste a lot of time. Again, what you put into your body is what you get out of it. This is probably the least controversial thing you'll ever hear in this space. Eat right, work out, get enough sleep. Don't fill your body with too much poison. I shouldn't have to explain it past there. And then he ends off with, your body is the temple that houses your mind. Following on the previous point, higher testosterone increases your abilities and leaves you feeling more energetic. Lift. And he mentions a bunch of other stuff here about health, but the testosterone, and that's the interesting one. Again, a little bit of truth, a lot of fiction. He doesn't really bring it up, but a lot of the male traits aren't some intrinsic trait that our spirit gives upon us. A lot of these are hormonal things. And if you have low testosterone, we've already seen, like, there's some studies out there, but you can kind of see it in other people when they used to work out and then they notice their testosterone goes down. They become more emotional. They become more conflict averse. They become kind of more bitchy. Physiologically, there's changes. So the male androgen is important in that it regulates our behavior in attractive masculine ways. Now, obviously, you can go too high. If you end up being one of those guys completely roided out, you end up with heart troubles, back acne. If you have a propensity towards anger, it kind of amplifies whatever emotional state you're in right now. That's why you'll get some swole dudes who cry on a whim, or some swole dudes who are extremely angry, that little meme about roid rage. But most guys are just them plus 20%. Now, there's a lot of estrogenetics in the world that we consume every day. For the longest time, every plastic bottle was leaking estrogen into us. Soy, as a bean protein, again, has estrogenetics in us. BPDs, same thing. There is a lot of estrogenics, like birth control. Turns out birth control is essentially estrogen. It fakes pregnancy in girls. It's unfortunately too small of a molecule to be filtered through water filtration systems. And that's why they're finding, as Alex Jones puts it, they're turning the frogs gay. Well, it turns out there's some truth to that. And just because of the prevalence of birth control in the water supply, it's actually adding estrogens to the body. Now, these are all, each one of these individually, very small amounts, but taken together, they can have a profound effect. And while there's no proof or evidence to it yet, it does make a strong case for how males' testosterone levels, putting aside age, people lose it over age, have been dropping steadily since the 1980s when they first started tracking it. And estrogenetics in the food and water supply have been a strong indication of what that's leading. So whether that means you need to supplement or not, that's a different conversation. But at the very least, heavy compound liftings on larger muscle groups are one of the best ways to naturally boost your testosterone, which will help mitigate any of these issues here. So that's the end of the Antibiotic Nuke. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I see a lot of chat in there. Guys, I know these ones are kind of more lectures, so I don't have a chance to engage with you more. I know I wish I could, but rest assured, if you leave a super chat, I definitely will take some time to recognize and acknowledge you guys here. Thank you for supporting the channel. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you like what you see. You guys know the spiel. You've been here long enough. And pass this on to your friends. I'll catch you guys on the next one. As far as the next topic, well, you'll see that when the thumbnail goes out, but catch you guys later.